Hillary Clinton caught as Elon Musk exposes her crimes in Congress. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. The air inside the Capitol building was thick with anticipation. The historic halls that once echoed with debates about civil rights, war, and the Constitution were now the stage for something equally momentous. Lawmakers, reporters, lobbyists, and spectators packed the room, their eyes trained on the front where the day's drama was set to unfold. The room was filled with whispers of excitement, curiosity, and concern, as people braced themselves for what could become one of the most explosive events in modern political history. At the center of it all stood Elon Musk, a man whose name had become synonymous with innovation, technology, and disruption. Yet today, his reputation was poised to take a different turn. Musk had long been a figure who stirred the public's imagination, from building reusable rockets to creating electric cars. But today, he was about to disrupt something much larger than the tech world, the very foundations of American politics. As the cameras flashed and the audience's murmur subsided, Musk took his place at the witness stand. He was dressed simply, in a black suit and a crisp white shirt, exuding a sense of calm control as he glanced around the room. His reputation as a billionaire entrepreneur and visionary had earned him respect, but few had ever expected him to step into the world of politics in such a direct way. Today, Musk was not here to discuss the latest rocket launch or the future of artificial intelligence. He was here to drop a bombshell. The committee chairman, Senator Andrew Holloway, a stoic man with years of political experience, called the hearing to order. The members of the committee, mostly seasoned politicians with decades of experience, watched him closely, aware that this hearing could alter the course of political history. Musk had been invited to testify under unusual circumstances. He had come forward with a trove of evidence that he claimed linked Hilary Clinton, one of the most powerful figures in American politics, to a network of illegal activities that spanned campaign finance violations, foreign interference, and possibly even more nefarious dealings. As Musk opened the thick manila folder in front of him, the room fell eerily quiet. His fingers moved methodically as he pulled out the first set of documents, a series of photos that he held up for the committee to see. The images were grainy but unmistakable. Clinton in a series of meetings with foreign diplomats, some of whom had been previously flagged for their involvement in financial schemes designed to influence U.S. politics. The photos alone were enough to make several committee members exchange uneasy glances, but Musk wasn't done yet. "Ladies and gentlemen," Musk began, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight, "what I am about to show you is not a conspiracy theory. It is not an invention of the press or the opposition. These are the facts. This is the truth." His words reverberated through the room as he flipped through more documents, each one more damning than the last. These are not mere rumors. They are backed by financial records, insider testimonies, and credible sources. What I present today is the result of months of research and investigation into a vast network that has been operating in the shadows for far too long. He continued, presenting evidence of illegal campaign donations being funneled through shell companies, violating the laws that govern political funding. As he laid out the financial records, the committee members were visibly taken aback. Large sums of money had been traced back to foreign governments with interests in manipulating American politics. Some of the transactions had been hidden in plain sight, disguised as donations to Clinton's campaign, but upon closer inspection, it was clear that they were meant to sway U.S. policy. Musk's evidence wasn't just about money, it was about power. "What I'm showing you here," he said as he displayed a series of detailed financial charts, "is how foreign entities were able to manipulate not only our election system, but also influence critical decisions made by members of Congress and the executive branch." His words were precise, and with every page he turned, the damning reality of Clinton's involvement seemed to grow. Musk had laid out a detailed, almost forensic case against the former Secretary of State, using not just circumstantial evidence but hard, undeniable facts. The room was silent, save for the rustling of papers as committee members studied the documents before them. The weight of Musk's presentation began to sink in. Some lawmakers had never seen anything like this before. An outsider, someone with no formal experience in politics, was accusing a former First Lady, U.S. Senator, and Secretary of State of being involved in illegal activities that could shake the foundations of American democracy. But Musk wasn't finished. He pulled out a final piece of evidence, a series of encrypted emails between Clinton's inner circle and various foreign agents. The emails, which Musk claimed had been decrypted through a collaboration with a third-party cybersecurity firm, were explosive. In them, Clinton's aides discussed how they had been involved in facilitating illicit donations from foreign governments, bypassing American laws in a scheme that spanned several election cycles. The gravity of the email's contents sent a ripple of disbelief through the room. With one final glance around the room, Musk closed the folder. His message had been delivered. As you can see, he concluded, this is not a conspiracy. This is a matter of national security. It is my belief that these activities, if left unchecked, could undermine the very foundation of our democratic system. And I am here today to ensure that the truth is heard. As Musk stepped back from the podium, the committee members sat in stunned silence. Some were visibly shaken, others exchanged whispers, but none could deny the gravity of the moment. The door had been opened, and there was no going back. On the other side of the room, Hillary Clinton sat motionless, her face a mask of composure. Her supporters were already preparing their rebuttals, but it was clear that something monumental had just occurred. Musk had put forth an accusation that couldn't easily be ignored. The next steps in the investigation were uncertain, but one thing was clear. The political world would never be the same again. As Elon Musk concluded his presentation, the Capitol room remained hushed for a moment that seemed to stretch on forever. The weight of his accusations hung heavily in the air. Each piece of evidence he presented like a ticking time bomb threatening to explode. Musk had, in essence, unleashed a political earthquake. The world was now watching, but the battle inside the chamber had only just begun. Senator Peter Lansing, a longtime ally of Hillary Clinton, was the first to break the silence. Lansing was a seasoned politician, sharp, quick-witted, and always prepared. His face, which had remained stoic during Musk's presentation, now betrayed an air of disbelief, bordering on anger. He stood from his seat, his chair scraping noisily against the floor. The spotlight shifted to him as he prepared to challenge Musk's credibility and attempt to discredit the claims that had already begun circulating in the press. "Mr. Musk," Lansing began, his voice booming across the room, "we all know that you've made your name as a tech mogul, but today you've stepped far outside your area of expertise. You've presented what you claim as evidence, but let's be clear, it's circumstantial at best. These photos, these documents, they are not conclusive proof of anything. They can be easily doctored, manipulated." Lansing's words were deliberate, calculated to create doubt in the minds of everyone listening. He paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. "The American people deserve more than a smear campaign built on photoshopped images and hearsay. You're not a politician, Mr. Musk, and you certainly are no expert in law enforcement or international relations. What you've presented here today is nothing more than a personal vendetta disguised as a political crusade." Musk, however, remained composed. His face was unreadable, his posture relaxed as he calmly addressed the senator's criticism. "Senator Lansing," Musk began, his voice as steady as ever, "I'm not here to play politics. I'm here to present the truth. And the truth is, the documents I've shown you have been corroborated by multiple sources. They are authentic. They are real. They are not a product of my imagination." His words, though measured, carried an undeniable authority. "If you're asking me to back down, I won't. Because the American people deserve to know the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be for some." The tension in the room was palpable, and Lansing's attempt to discredit Musk only seemed to amplify the tension further. A few murmurs rippled through the audience as the members of the committee exchanged uneasy glances. Clinton's supporters began shifting in their seats, visibly uncomfortable with the direction the hearing was taking. Lansing, clearly taken aback by Musk's unwavering confidence, quickly moved to another tactic. He turned toward the committee, his eyes scanning the room for support. "We must be cautious here. What we are witnessing is not an investigation, it's a spectacle. Mr. Musk is not a trained investigator. He doesn't have the expertise to make these kinds of claims, and his personal history is riddled with controversy." Lansing's voice grew more forceful. "We are talking about the reputation of a former Secretary of State and a former presidential candidate, a woman who has dedicated her life to public service. And here comes Mr. Musk, with no evidence other than a handful of documents, trying to ruin her career." As Lansing spoke, several of Clinton's supporters nodded in agreement. A few senators murmured their assent, clearly eager to take the focus off the evidence Musk had presented. But Musk wasn't backing down. He continued to maintain his calm composure, even as the attacks against him grew sharper. His critics attempted to paint him as a man with a personal agenda, a tech billionaire who had something to gain from tearing down a political giant. "We've all heard the allegations," Lansing continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But where is the substance? Where are the concrete facts? This is nothing more than a show, nothing more than an attempt to discredit one of the most accomplished public servants of our time." Musk stood tall, his gaze unwavering. "Senator Lansing, with all due respect, the evidence is right here. You can try to discredit me all you want, but it doesn't change the facts. I've presented photographs, financial records, and emails. You don't need to be an expert in politics to see that something is deeply wrong here. Foreign governments, entities with their own agendas, are influencing our elections and our policies. And if that's not a problem for you, then maybe you need to take a closer look at the situation we're facing." Lansing's face reddened with frustration. He opened his mouth to speak again, but Musk cut him off. "I've given you the truth. The rest is up to you." Before Lansing could retort, a new voice interjected. This time, it was Senator Emma Hall, another Clinton ally, who had been sitting quietly in the background. She had spent years in Washington, carefully cultivating a reputation as a voice of reason. She rose slowly from her seat, her expression one of calm determination. "Mr. Musk," she began, her tone soothing but firm, "I appreciate your testimony, but you must understand that the ramifications of what you're suggesting are profound. Allegations of this magnitude cannot be based on circumstantial evidence alone. We cannot allow ourselves to be swayed by innuendo and speculation. We need hard proof, proof that goes beyond photographs and emails. We need concrete, verifiable facts." Musk nodded, acknowledging her point. "I agree, Senator Hall. But the evidence I've shown you is just the beginning. If you truly want proof, I encourage you to follow the trail. The more you dig, the clearer it will become. The question is, are you willing to follow it?" Senator Hall hesitated for a moment, then turned to her colleagues. "We'll need to look into this further, but it's clear that we need a more thorough investigation into these claims." Her words seemed to carry weight, as several other committee members murmured their agreement. For a brief moment, it seemed like Clinton's supporters might have regained some ground. But the mood in the room had shifted. Musk had not only presented a compelling case, but he had also done something few expected. He had held his ground in the face of intense pressure. The hearing was far from over, but one thing had become clear. The allegations against Hillary Clinton could no longer be dismissed as mere conspiracy. The evidence was there, and now it was up to the committee to decide whether they would pursue it. As the questioning continued, Clinton's defenders tried once more to deflect, attempting to paint Musk as a man driven by personal grudges and an outsized ego. But with each passing moment, it became harder to deny that the truth was staring them all in the face. The battle for public perception was only beginning, and the stakes were higher than anyone had anticipated. The following day after Elon Musk's explosive testimony, the world was in a frenzy. News outlets around the globe ran 24/7 coverage of the congressional hearing. What had begun as a relatively quiet Capitol Hill event had quickly morphed into a political spectacle of unprecedented proportions. Musk, the tech mogul turned whistleblower, had unwittingly placed Hillary Clinton at the center of a storm that threatened to unravel everything she had worked for in her illustrious political career. The headlines said it all. Elon Musk exposes Clinton's alleged ties to foreign governments, Clinton accused of major campaign finance violations, and Musk drops bombshell evidence on national television. It seemed as though everyone had an opinion, from the most prominent political commentators to the ordinary citizens who had never followed a hearing in their lives. Social media exploded with reactions, memes, and passionate debates, with hashtags like #MuskExposesClinton and #ClintonScandal trending across Twitter and Facebook. Supporters of Clinton angrily dismissed Musk's accusations as politically motivated, claiming he was attempting to destroy her career. On the other side, Clinton's critics, many of whom had long been skeptical of her, took to the internet to celebrate what they saw as long overdue accountability. In Washington, however, the reactions were far more muted. Inside the halls of power, where deals were brokered and reputations made and broken, the question was no longer about the veracity of Musk's claims. It was about what this all meant for the future of American politics. Clinton had long been an established figure, admired by some, reviled by others, but no one could deny her influence. She had held high office, run a presidential campaign, and been a constant fixture in American political life for decades. Now, with the charges against her gaining traction, her future in the political arena was uncertain. In the hours following Musk's testimony, Clinton's team scrambled to formulate a response. Her communications director, Robert King, was on the phone with the best legal teams, working with them to challenge Musk's evidence. Meanwhile, Clinton herself remained largely out of the public eye. Her advisors carefully drafted statements, working to frame Musk's revelations as a politically motivated attack. They argued that Musk's financial ties to powerful conservative backers painted him as a biased, unreliable source. They discredited the documents, claiming they were taken out of context, twisted, and misrepresented. But despite the fervent denials, the damage was undeniable. Public opinion began to shift. A national poll conducted just hours after the hearing showed a sharp decline in Clinton's approval ratings. According to the poll, 48% of Americans now believe that Clinton had likely been involved in illegal activities, a staggering increase from just days before when only 29% had thought so. The number of people who considered Musk's claims to be at least plausible had risen to 54%. The political landscape was shifting beneath Clinton's feet, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to control the narrative. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, the congressional committee tasked with investigating the claims Musk had made was divided. Some committee members, particularly those from the opposition party, were eager to see an investigation launched immediately. They argued that the American people had a right to know the full extent of Clinton's involvement in any illegal activities, especially when the integrity of the political system was at stake. But Clinton's allies on the committee pushed back, arguing that Musk's testimony should be dismissed as just another distraction in the cutthroat world of American politics. To them, Musk's accusations were the work of a man who had never held elected office and was seeking to gain political leverage by bringing down a high-profile target. At the same time, more and more Americans were growing disillusioned with the political establishment. For many, Musk's testimony represented a new kind of transparency, a way of shining a light on the powerful figures who had long operated behind closed doors. The American public, long weary of corruption in the halls of power, now found themselves captivated by the idea that a tech billionaire with no vested interest in Washington's power games might be the person to expose the truth. Across the country, the fallout was reverberating in unexpected places. In small towns, in living rooms, in community centers, the story was dominating conversations. Ordinary people, not typically engaged with the day-to-day of Washington, found themselves discussing the implications of Musk's testimony. Was Hillary Clinton guilty of these charges? What did this mean for the future of the Democratic Party? Was there a larger, hidden system of corruption that Musk had uncovered? And then, of course, there were the whispered conversations behind closed doors. The conversations that would ultimately shape the next steps in the political drama unfolding. Clinton's allies were urging her to stay out of the limelight, to avoid making public statements that could further inflame the situation. But Clinton herself was anything but passive. Behind closed doors, she was fuming. How had it come to this? How had she, someone who had survived countless scandals in her decades-long career, allowed herself to become ensnared in a situation like this? She had always been able to weather storms before, but this was different. This was no ordinary scandal. Clinton, who had spent decades carefully crafting her image as a champion for the people, was now being forced to confront the possibility that her political legacy might be forever tarnished. The question on everyone's mind was whether she could survive this. Would she be able to mount a comeback? Or was this the beginning of the end for one of the most influential women in modern American politics? As the days went on, Clinton's camp intensified its efforts to control the narrative. They filed motions to have Musk's evidence dismissed, claiming it was inadmissible. They rallied supporters and prepared for the inevitable legal battles that would come. But behind the scenes, they knew the situation was more precarious than it appeared. As the investigation continued and more evidence came to light, the public's perception of Clinton continued to shift. In the weeks following the hearing, the legal ramifications of Musk's testimony began to take shape. Several prominent law firms were hired to look into Musk's claims, as well as the wider implications for campaign finance law and foreign interference in U.S. elections. The investigation was still in its early stages, but it was clear that the revelations would only become more damning as more information surfaced. Musk had started a process that could eventually result in Clinton facing criminal charges, something that, just a week before, would have seemed unthinkable. For Clinton, the aftermath of the hearing was an unrelenting, 24/7 grind of meetings, legal briefs, and strategy sessions. Every day, her camp scrambled to regain control of the narrative, but as the weeks passed, it became harder and harder to keep the scandal from spiraling out of control. Every press conference, every legal motion, every attempt to discredit Musk only seemed to make the story more explosive. And in the background, the nation continued to watch, divided. Some saw Musk as a whistleblower, a truth-teller bravely exposing the corruption of Washington. Others saw him as a dangerous disruptor with a personal vendetta, an outsider with the power to bring down a political giant. But what everyone agreed on was this. This story was far from over, and the political fallout was only just beginning. In the weeks following the explosive testimony, the investigation into Hillary Clinton's alleged involvement in illegal activities, sparked by Elon Musk's revelations, began to gain serious momentum. What initially seemed like a sensational hearing, an isolated incident that would fade with time, had become a full-fledged political crisis. As news outlets continued to report on the scandal, the weight of Musk's evidence began to seep into the broader conversation, shaking not just Clinton's career, but the trust of the American public in the political system itself. The truth Musk had presented was now being dissected, investigated, and analyzed by experts across the nation. It was clear that the implications of his accusations reached far beyond the former Secretary of State. Federal investigators were brought into the fold. Agencies like the FBI and the Department of Justice began examining the documents Musk had presented, looking for corroborative evidence to back up his claims. Investigators scoured the financial records, trying to piece together the alleged network of foreign influence, campaign finance violations, and covert meetings that Musk had highlighted in his testimony. They pored over the photos Musk had presented, the ones showing Clinton interacting with foreign diplomats and officials from governments known to have questionable ties to global financial dealings. The most difficult aspect of the investigation was the complex network of money trails that Musk had uncovered. Clinton's campaign finance records were extensive, filled with large donations from various sources, some legitimate, others far more questionable. Investigators began to trace the flow of funds, working backwards from shell companies and foreign accounts that had funneled money into her political efforts. It was clear that these transactions were not simply mistakes or minor violations. Instead, they represented a carefully crafted strategy to circumvent U.S. election laws. Money had been funneled through multiple layers of shell companies, masking the true origin of the donations. But with Musk's evidence in hand, investigators were starting to piece together a much larger picture. The complexity of the case drew attention from politicians on both sides of the aisle, many of whom had never imagined they would find themselves embroiled in such a high-stakes investigation. Some, like Republican Senator Harold Pierce, saw the scandal as an opportunity to drive a wedge between Clinton and the Democratic Party. Pierce publicly called for an immediate Senate investigation, urging his colleagues to take action and demand accountability from Clinton. "This is not just about Hillary Clinton," he said in a statement. "This is about the integrity of our political system. Foreign influence has no place in our elections, and we cannot let powerful individuals bypass the law to sway our democracy." On the other hand, Clinton's allies dug in their heels, attempting to control the damage and cast doubt on Musk's claims. They launched aggressive counter-campaigns, questioning the authenticity of the documents Musk had presented, claiming that they were selectively edited, misinterpreted, or simply not genuine. Some went so far as to accuse Musk of trying to destroy Clinton's legacy for his own political gain, positioning him as an outsider with personal motives and no real understanding of the intricacies of U.S. political law. But despite their efforts to discredit Musk, the scandal was too big to ignore. Public opinion was shifting. Clinton's approval ratings, once robust and unwavering, had begun to plummet. According to a new poll conducted by the Washington Post, a growing majority of Americans were now questioning her integrity. While her diehard supporters remained vocal, more and more people were starting to ask difficult questions. What had she known, and when had she known it? Had Clinton knowingly participated in a system designed to manipulate the U.S. political system? Or was she simply the unwitting victim of a much larger conspiracy? These questions were on the minds of voters as the investigation moved forward. In Washington, the pressure on Clinton's camp was mounting. Every day, new leaks surfaced, often coming from anonymous sources within the investigation. Lawmakers and political insiders, some of whom had long been in Clinton's corner, began to distance themselves. Some urged Clinton to step down from public life, fearing that her involvement in the scandal would taint the entire Democratic Party and the future of the 2024 presidential election. But Clinton refused to back down. She was not one to bow to pressure, not after everything she had overcome in her career. Behind closed doors, Clinton's legal team scrambled to mount a defense. They worked tirelessly to discredit Musk, but the more they tried, the more the investigation seemed to be gaining steam. They hired high-powered lawyers and consultants, many of whom were seasoned veterans in political crises. But even they were beginning to wonder if they could turn the tide in her favor. One of Clinton's most trusted allies, former Attorney General Martha Reynolds, called a private meeting with Clinton's top advisors. "We need to control the narrative before it gets completely out of hand," Reynolds said. "Musk is playing us like a fiddle. He's got the public on his side, and every day that passes, we lose more ground. We need to be proactive. If we don't act fast, this could ruin the party, and it could ruin you." Clinton listened carefully, her face impassive as Reynolds spoke. "What's our next move?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with frustration. Reynolds hesitated. "We need to come out with a full, transparent report of everything Musk has claimed. We need to get ahead of the narrative, release the findings of an independent audit, and do everything we can to discredit these accusations publicly. We need to show the American people that we're taking this seriously and that we are committed to uncovering the truth." Clinton leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on the wall as she mulled over Reynolds' words. She had fought too hard for too long to let this scandal be the thing that ended her political career. "We will fight this to the end," she said resolutely. "We've survived worse, and we'll survive this." But as the days turned into weeks, Clinton's resolve was tested. More evidence continued to surface, confirming some of Musk's claims and leaving others unanswered. Investigators dug deeper into the foreign donations and shady financial dealings. Former employees and insiders who had once worked with Clinton began to come forward, adding new layers to the story. Some claimed to have witnessed her involvement in meetings with foreign agents. Others recalled suspicious interactions that seemed to point toward a far more significant conspiracy than anyone had realized. And still, Musk remained a steady presence, refusing to back down despite the growing political pressure. He had become an unlikely hero to many of Clinton's critics, seen as the man who had single-handedly brought the most powerful woman in American politics to her knees. But for Musk, this wasn't about personal gain or revenge. It was about exposing what he believed to be an ugly truth. The investigation into Hillary Clinton was not just about one person. It was about the broader questions of political corruption, foreign influence, and the integrity of American democracy. And as the investigation deepened, it became clear that this story was far from over. What Musk had started in that congressional hearing would take months, possibly years, to fully unfold, and the consequences would ripple through the corridors of power for decades to come. Months had passed since Elon Musk's testimony, and what had once seemed like a political spectacle had transformed into a national crisis. The investigation into Hillary Clinton's alleged involvement in illegal activities had become a slow-burning fire, threatening to consume her political legacy. Despite her best efforts to discredit the evidence and distance herself from the scandal, the truth was slowly but surely unraveling. The pressure had reached unprecedented levels. Clinton's camp had fought tooth and nail to block the investigation, dismissing the evidence Musk had presented as a concoction of political motives and exaggerated claims. They had held press conferences, launched public relations campaigns, and even sought the assistance of high-profile legal teams to challenge the mounting allegations. But nothing seemed to stem the tide of public and political scrutiny. Every day brought new revelations. Every new piece of evidence seemed to reinforce Musk's claims, and the American people, who had once viewed Clinton as untouchable, were now questioning her integrity. The investigation into Clinton's campaign finance violations had dug deep into the financial networks Musk had initially revealed. It wasn't just about one or two shady donations. It was a web of illicit transactions, foreign donations funneled through various intermediaries, and convoluted financial structures designed to hide the true origin of the money. The complexity of the operation had stunned even the most seasoned investigators. But as they dug deeper, they discovered a disturbing pattern of foreign influence in Clinton's campaign that extended beyond simple monetary donations. Foreign agents and diplomats had been using backdoor channels to influence U.S. policy by strategically donating to Clinton's campaign in exchange for favorable treatment. Some of the entities involved had been linked to governments with histories of authoritarianism, human rights violations, and corrupt financial practices. These revelations were particularly troubling because they weren't isolated to just one country. They spanned across continents, involving governments in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. The financial transactions themselves were damning. Large sums of money had been transferred through shell companies and anonymous accounts, disguising their true origin. Investigators had uncovered a network of middlemen, lawyers, financial advisors, and business executives, all working to funnel money into Clinton's campaign. These were not isolated incidents or accidental missteps. They were part of a coordinated effort to bypass campaign finance laws and sway U.S. politics in favor of foreign interests. The evidence was overwhelming, and as each piece was pieced together, the case against Clinton grew stronger. Behind the scenes, Clinton's legal team continued to deny any wrongdoing, calling the investigation politically motivated and accusing Musk of using his wealth and influence to orchestrate a smear campaign. But even they had begun to realize that the walls were closing in. Legal experts and consultants, who had initially dismissed Musk's claims as baseless, were now advising Clinton to settle, to find a way to mitigate the damage before things spiraled even further. The risk of indictment seemed increasingly real, and her chances of ever running for office again were growing slimmer by the day. But Clinton refused to back down. Her tenacity had been a defining trait throughout her career, and now, in the face of the most significant political crisis she had ever faced, she was determined to fight. With each new piece of evidence, she doubled down, calling the allegations an attack on her legacy. She refused to let Musk, or anyone else, define her. As public opinion turned against her, she used her considerable political resources to rally her remaining allies, demanding their support in the face of mounting pressure. In an attempt to shift the narrative, Clinton's team launched a full-scale media blitz. They called on journalists to question the authenticity of the evidence, highlighting the possibility that Musk's testimony had been tampered with or selectively presented. Clinton herself gave a rare interview, where she fiercely defended her actions and condemned the attacks as politically motivated. "This is nothing more than a smear campaign," she declared. "I have spent my entire life fighting for the American people, and now I'm being targeted by a man who has nothing to gain but personal glory." But the media was no longer on her side. Once powerful voices in the press, who had long been sympathetic to her, began to turn against her. Major newspapers, once allies of Clinton, began publishing damning op-eds questioning her integrity. Political commentators on both sides of the aisle started to call for accountability, with many suggesting that her resignation was the only way to restore trust in American politics. The country's once dominant political figure was now struggling to retain even a shred of her public image. Even as Clinton's defenders scrambled to mount a final defense, the investigation showed no signs of slowing down. Federal investigators were now expanding their efforts, working with international agencies to trace the foreign connections that had been so carefully concealed. Several individuals tied to the shell companies used to funnel donations had been arrested, and more were expected to be charged. The FBI had also taken an interest in several key figures from Clinton's campaign, calling them in for questioning. Some had already turned state's evidence, offering critical details in exchange for immunity. These revelations added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Clinton's inner circle was rapidly unraveling, and many former supporters were publicly distancing themselves from her. The pressure on Clinton intensified when one of her former aides, Sarah Griffiths, agreed to cooperate with investigators. Griffiths had been with Clinton's campaign from the very beginning and had intimate knowledge of the operations within the campaign. Her testimony was a game-changer. She confirmed that several senior campaign officials had been aware of the illicit donations and had worked to cover them up. While Griffiths stopped short of implicating Clinton directly, her account painted a picture of a campaign that had knowingly broken the law. The bombshell testimony sent shockwaves through Washington, and it was clear that Clinton's position had become increasingly untenable. In a last-ditch effort to salvage her political career, Clinton publicly called for an independent investigation into the allegations. "I welcome any investigation that will bring the truth to light," she declared in a speech. "I have nothing to hide. The American people deserve to know the truth, and I am committed to ensuring that the full extent of this matter is uncovered. But by now, the damage had been done. Clinton's political career, which had once seemed destined for greater heights, had effectively come to a halt. Even if she were not criminally charged, her reputation would never fully recover. The scandal had tarnished her legacy, and her chances of running for office again had diminished to near zero. As the investigation continued to unfold, Musk remained at the center of the storm. His role as a whistleblower had made him a hero to many, but his critics accused him of using the scandal to further his own political and financial ambitions. Yet, Musk's focus remained unwavering. His goal had always been clear: to expose corruption at the highest levels of government, regardless of the personal cost. By the time the investigation concluded, the true extent of Clinton's involvement would be revealed. The consequences would be far-reaching, affecting not just Clinton but the entire political system. Musk had exposed a dark underbelly of U.S. politics, one that would require years of reform to fix. For Clinton, the truth had unraveled in a way she could never have predicted. And while the final chapter of her political career was still being written, one thing was certain: the American political landscape would never be the same again.